Welcome to the Small Town Pastor Podcast. This podcast is a ministry of Small Town Network. We exist to make disciples, train pastors, and plant churches in smaller communities. My name is Eric Nielsen. I'm joined today by my co-host, Tony Colomb. And then we're also joined today with my good friend, John Kelley. So say hello, guys.
Hey,
Hello.
good morning.
Well, I'm excited today. We're starting a 4 episode streak here where we're featuring church planners with the Small Town Network. And the first one, I'm actually, don't tell the other guys, but I'm most excited about John because John actually goes to my church plant, High Plains Christian Church here in Twin Falls. And John is getting ready to plant a church in Jerome, Idaho, which will launch, Lord willing, in October of 2025. So not too far away. So John,
That's great.
why don't you just give us like we joke around about the 2 minute testimony that you learned at your give us like your basic like life story, how you became a disciple of Jesus, and then we'll kind of get into some of the things about your church plant.
Okay. Well, I kind of came up through a home life that was pretty rough all the way around. I lost my dad left us when I was 9 years old, and there was five of us kids, and I was the oldest, and kind of took off to be a dad right away. And then mom started taking us to church, and that kind of gave me a little bit of an intro into what it means to be a believer. Although I was able to be a free guy, and I could do whatever I wanted as a kid and as a young man. And so I kind of did church and did life and had my cake and eat it too type of life. And at times it was fun in my sin, and at times it was unbelievably painful.
Mhm.
And when I graduated from high school, I moved right into kind of a mature type of dating situation where I was looking for older women because I had already done the kid thing. And I ended up finding my wife, and we kind of did things all wrong in the beginning. Kind of moved in together and all that stuff there. But at any
Sure.
rate, when I was 25 years old, and by that point I had four kids. A man, a pastor, he confronted me with my quote unquote dual life, if you will. And
Kind of the hypocrisy thing going on.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. The hypocrisy thing, and kind of nailed me to the carpet and said, you can't say you believe in something and not live that way. And
Mm.
he was dead on, and the Holy Spirit was just really at that point I surrendered. And so from that point I took off into ministry. We literally within a week, I mean a week, sorry, within a month we were youth pastors in
Wow.
Idaho.
Welcome to
Uh,
ministry.
yeah, welcome to
I
ministry, and
love
boom,
that.
you're right in, and we took off. And my wife and I have been married shortly. Let's see, month or so. We've been married 29 years,
Wow,
and
Awesome.
it has been ups and downs all the way around. You take two people that are both come from a past like we have, and it's been rough working through all those things. And but God has been so good, and He has taught me so many things. And even at the point we're halfway through our marriage, we almost didn't make it. I mean, there was divorce on the table and the whole thing, but God redeemed every ounce of that. And through all the ministry opportunities that we've had, He has taught us so many things.
Wow.
So in a
awesome.
nutshell, that's kind of where we are currently today.
Okay, so
So,
let's fast forward then to like how we met because and I was just thinking there's something I don't know if I told you before, but John is part of another church in town that we have a good relationship with. There's some great
uh-huh.
people there. But that church has had some challenges. And when I first got here, like 5 years ago, they were just kind of going through kind of a, would you say it's fair, John, to say a split?
I would say so. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
something like that,
reasonable.
whatever,
Yeah.
however you want to describe it. Some kind of a separation, and some people left, some people stayed. So I met this one person who doesn't need to be named, and he told me that the problem at this church was this guy named John Kelley.
Oh, what an
He literally said
introduction.
that, right?
What
Yeah.
what
And
what a start to
so
a relationship.
yeah, and so like I'm like, oh, that guy John Kelley, he's trouble, you know.
Stay away.
But I kind of live by this policy of like I'll make my own decisions about people. You know what I'm saying, guys? Like
Sure.
someone
Yeah.
will say something like, "Watch out for that guy, he's trouble," and I'm like, I'll reserve my own opinion on on that.
There's
Because a
always
lot of
two
times the
sides of the
people,
story,
what's that?
There's always two sides of the
Yeah,
story.
always, right?
Always.
So then I don't remember how, John, like why or how you got my number. Was it Jason that gave it to you?
It was Jason Carr. Yep.
So I get this call and this guy goes, "I'm John Kelley," and I'm like, "Oh no." How is this gonna go? And then we sat down for coffee here in town, and it was literally like my brother from another mother. I
Hmm.
mean,
Oh, for sure.
we just connected. And there was like no real agenda. It was just kind of a get to know you thing. And I think maybe the first time I talked to you, John, I was like, you ought to be a church planner. Did I say that the first time we met?
Yeah, you did. It was in our first conversation. Yes.
Okay. So talk about we started our church with this idea of, disciples making disciples, pastors raising up pastors, being a church planting church. And I shared that vision with you, and you just like came alive. You just like immediately like reacted to that in a very positive way. Tell us why that resonated with you
Hmm.
in such a way.
So almost all through ministry, even from day one, I began to see the church and what was going wrong. And even in the early days, I was very young. I was young in ministry. I was young in life, really. But I just things started adding up in my head. Well, this is not working, and that's not working. And how come? Fortunately for me, I was always on the sideline. I was a youth minister, and in youth, you can do anything. There's kind of no rules,
Right.
and church is church, and you just love on those kids and do a lot of fun stuff. But I could see these things going wrong. And then a little bit later in ministry, I started pushing against that. And I would push against it in different ways, whether I was on a church board or whether I was an elder or just a spokesman. But usually, because I was that youth guy, I got a seat at these meetings. And so then I would push against the flow of what I saw was going wrong. And this is multiple churches here locally. And also, we were a part of a team, a missionary team that would do weekend revivals. And I went out 36 times, so 36 different churches in America. And they
Wow.
all had the same thing going on. I could see
So,
these nuances, these things that were failing. And so, again, that was just adding these things in my mind as to someday church needs to be done different, and maybe I can try to get it done now. And I was brutalized for that. The established church of today does not want change. They're not interested in doing things any different than the status quo.
so I'm
It's
curious then, like looking back on that, what can you identify for us without like completely throwing someone under the bus? Like, what are some of those common traits that you think were just not right, things being done wrong? What could be done differently, or what's it stirring in your heart to go about with this church plant forward?
the mission team that I was on. Let's go to that really quick because that helped me to see a lot of ways that the Holy Spirit could work in people's lives immediately. And these were weekend revivals that were put on by lay people. So none of us were trained, none of us, no fancy staff, no expensive people. We were just all regular folks out there getting into people's lives by sharing our testimony clearly, and then by small groups. We literally were in these small groups multiple times. We lived with these people, we ate with these people, and this happened for 10 years, 36 times for us. And I'm seeing that happening, and unbelievable things are happening in these conversations. People are falling on their face right before God, right there, and repenting and the whole thing. And so I'm seeing this and I'm thinking, why aren't we doing something similar in church? Why is church the pew warmers on Sunday morning? All the programs we have, we're trying to get things bigger and better, and more laser lights and more smoke and more whatever we can do to somehow create a feeling. And here I am looking at this basic program here where we're just loving people, sharing what God has done in our life, and then sharing with them in a small group on a more intimate setting. And all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit shows up, and boom, life is changing. And so that was what I was seeing. And I wasn't on lay witness mission, but I was not seeing that in the established church. And so pushing against it, meaning I was trying to create programs or whatever, or kind of go this direction. And it was like, yeah, no way. We don't do church that way. We don't
Hmm.
We don't small group. We don't, we all have to, anybody who's on the stage has got to be trained and expensive, and we pay that guy a salary, and all just the list goes on and on and on.
Mhm.
And I'm the whole time fighting against this because I see a basic thing that works here,
Mhm.
kind of a basic Acts type of church, and nobody wants to hear it. Nobody's interested in that.
Yeah,
So
I
then
love that.
fast. Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Oh, sorry. I love that because I feel like that's like the philosophy that translates size of church, context you find yourself in, kind of that program driven versus discipleship driven, and like
Yes,
expanding the kingdom, that priesthood of believers philosophy, and not running through the gatekeepers of, paid staff and things like that.
right.
So cool. I just wanted to kind of clarify a little bit from my own mind and hearing your story,
Yeah.
like what were some of those things that were missing and kind of where the heart is in moving forward with the church plant. So
So
I
we
love
go,
Yes,
so we
definitely.
go, so fast forward then. So we go, I think within, I don't even know if it's 2 months, John, you started attending with us and immediately in a discipleship group and still talking about discipleship and church planting. And and then all of a sudden you decide to go to Mexico. So like I've got my first church planter on the line. Here we go, game on. And then John's like, I'm moving to Mexico. So there there's a story here, but before you get into that, I just want to quickly say so, and I say this is not to like in any kind of looking down way. This is like a looking up thing. John has never been to Bible college. John was never formally educated in the way of like a theologian would be or a traditional pastor. And yet he has been in ministry since the days, like since month one, right? Got serious about the Lord, went right into ministry. Um, and tell him what you do for a living, like your training, you have some trade training and how what you do for your living.
Definitely. I do have trade training, actually official training, in construction of all types, building and so residential and commercial. I also have electrical and HVAC and plumbing, and I've done all of those things. And then on top of it, probably more than anything, I've been an auto mechanic since I was a kid, and I have worked on lawnmowers to semi trucks and everything in between for 35 years. I've
Mm.
done that. And so that's fixing machines is honestly my game. That's my bread and butter. That's how it's always been
And
in
as a
my
personal testimony, I purchased two vehicles from you, and they both run fantastic.
yeah.
So, and if for some reason they don't, you know how to fix it. So,
Right.
so personal
That's for sure.
testimony. So, the thread here, though, John, is that you have been kind of a serial entrepreneur. You're a
Yes.
guy that has an idea, that has a plan, and you know how to put stuff together, make stuff work, and make money doing it. And so you've really been, would it be fair to say you've been mostly self-employed your adult life?
At least 75% self-employed.
Yeah,
Wow.
so super important as we think about church planting. We're already kind of like breaking down stereotypes in this conversation about what a church planter is. So, no formal Bible college training, no formal theological training, and yet very good at ministry. No like structure, no building, no budget, no people, but someone that knows how to have an idea and put it in motion, right? And so we're not looking for some of the things that people might traditionally be looking for, but we're recognizing different qualities that actually lend themselves to the kind of church planting that we're trying to do with small town. So the mechanic thing really is what opened up the door to the Mexico thing. So give us like a quick rundown of like why you went to Mexico, what that was supposed to be about, and kind of how that went.
So Mexico was not even on the radar at first. We moved our daughter, my daughter and son-in-law down to Mexico. They were going to be in ministry in the TJ Tijuana area, and we helped move them down there. And when we got there, there was a pastor at Calvary Chapel in Playas, Tijuana, and I had met him prior, just about 8 months prior. And anyway, when I got down there, I connected with him, and right away, I mean, almost immediately, he said, John, what would you think of moving down here with your kids? You could come down here. He's got a men's home. I need somebody to teach them some skills, and you got skills. So, what would you think of that? And so I just kind of let that ride for a little bit, and then I moved the kids into a separate ministry. It was a different, same city, just different area, and I met all the staff up there. It was a base, Calvary Chapel base, and I met all the staff up there, and I honestly don't know how, especially these guys, because I had never met any one of them. But the leader of that base pulled me aside day two and was walking around the base with me and said, have you ever considered coming down here? Because I think that you have abilities that would be used down here, that you have skills that could be used in ministry. And I was really shocked by him because he didn't know me. He'd never met me. And how would he know those things? I don't know. But anyway, and he doesn't connect with the Plius Calvary guy either. Those two guys they didn't have lunch together every week. So both of those things to me were like, wow, this is a big deal to be told these things. I let it ride though. I didn't do anything about it. And we got the kids down there and then we headed home. And on our way home, Kimberly and I prayed and then I made a couple of calls to some guys. I have a couple guys I know that are super hardcore praying type of guys who I trust what God tells them. Anyway, I told those guys, I said, I'm not going to give you any premise here. I just simply want you to pray in the next 2 weeks for Mexico, the Kelleys in Mexico. That's it. That's all I told them. And I'll get with you guys in 2 weeks. And so anyway, that being said, I came back and I had a good idea as to where we were going to end up. And I talked to my buddy here, Eric, and I said, Eric, this is a real possibility. Although I will say this, Eric did say his first words to me were, "Oh, you're going to be going to Mexico." And so he
I'm a
doesn't
quick
know it.
study.
He doesn't know it, but that was very much of a confirmation already for him to
Mm,
say that. And then I got a hold of my buddies shortly thereafter, and both of those men, before I told them anything that you have just heard, both of those men said, "We believe that God is wants to send you and your wife down to Mexico."
mm,
And so that was it. We knew that that was going to happen, and then that began a very difficult process to get there, absolutely stripping both of us of our will and our way and our thought of what that should be,
mm,
and then and also basically breaking us financially as well. We had to sell everything we had and then just go down there literally with no money.
I
We had a
personally
little bit
bought
of
John's backpack blower,
yeah.
kayak, and mountain bike,
Yeah.
and I've
We had a
offered to sell
little
all of them back plus
yeah.
50%.
Yeah, in fairness, High Plains got behind us as a sending church, and some of the people in the church stepped up, and so they took care of about 25% of the budget we needed.
mm,
And for that, we were tremendously blessed. I have so much great to say about that, but we'll carry on here. We got down into Mexico, and um, the long and the short of it is when you try to go to a different country with a language barrier and just all kinds of things different, and then try to create what you're already doing in the States, what I've done my whole life. That alone is just unbelievably difficult for forever. It doesn't, you never really work it all out.
Yeah,
And then on
Tony, do
top
you
of
want to
that,
weigh in on that real quick?
yes,
yeah. I was in Japan for a little bit, so yeah.
yeah,
It's a different ball game, that's for sure.
So
for sure.
super,
And
super,
so
super challenging trying to recreate that.
Yeah.
yeah, so we had that going on, and then on top of that, you have a security issue consistently. So, and for a man, that is something, you know, God's created us to be a protector. God's created us to be these things for our family, our wife, and even my son and daughter-in-law. Even though my son is very capable, I mean, my son-in-law is very, very, very capable. I was never I was never off duty. So for 2 years, every single day was on duty for major security concerns. And so that was going on all the time. And then just this utter basically beating your head against the wall every single day of your life. And so to sum it all up, I could not have done the church plant that we're going to do now had I not gone there.
Mm,
Mexico taught me some unbelievable lessons about myself, about small things about my character, my sin nature that needed some refinement, my character that definitely needed some hard edges knocked off of, some dependence on God issues. I mean, John's got a tool for every single application there is. I really do. I've got a tool bag that's full of
I've seen
everything.
them.
I
I think
can
I picked him
fix
up twice, John.
absolutely. Yes, you did. I can fix absolutely everything, but I cannot fix my heart and I cannot fix my
mm,
mind. And
mm,
so to separate that I needed a hard lesson in life.
mm,
And God gave me a very hard lesson in life. And so all of that helped to really refine just who I am as a person, so that now I see this as a total dependence on God
Yeah.
project,
mm,
where in the past I wouldn't have. I would have come at it with my skills and abilities
mhm,
and known that I had a solution and known that I'll make an answer happen. And now I don't know that anymore. And it's for all the right reasons.
mm.
And
Mm.
so Mexico is, yeah, helped me with some anger things and just the list goes on. And so it was a huge piece of the puzzle.
I just love that reflection that you have because I think like for any church planter, especially regardless of the context, small town, big city, whatever it is, like sometimes we get intimidated by the assessments, the strategies, the tools, and all the things, but that stuff doesn't matter until we understand or ask ourselves the question, am I the man that God needs me to be in order to step into this role, regardless of the context? And
Yeah, am I
am I
ready
being
to
a,
do what, am I
yeah,
prepared myself to do what he's
yeah,
asked me to do?
yeah.
And John, you did come back a different guy. And look, in not throwing shade on anybody, we're talking about you at the moment, but we could share the same or similar stories about how God humbled us and
Mm,
taught us to rely on him more and us, ourselves less.
mm,
So you come back. Actually, I think I came down and we met and talked about church planting. And so the second time that I made a hard run at you and saying, I think God's calling you to be a church planter, why'd you guys say yes? I pitched this vision about what we're doing. What led you to say yes to that? What about doing this interested you guys? And
Well, there's two pieces to this. First, that meeting that you had was absolutely critical for my wife. Um, my wife and I are a team. We do everything together, or we don't do it at all. That's just the way it is on everything. She's all in, or I'm not in. And so anyway, so when I went to Mexico, it was always the mindset in the back of my mind, when we return, we're probably going to do this church planting thing. In my wife's mind, on the other hand, things were very difficult for her. And while we were there in Mexico, out pops grandkids, and now, now I'm a grandmother, and now I want to go home and just be a grandmother. Um, and life and ministry down here is unbelievably brutal and very tough. And so the church planting thing was in the back of my mind. And so Eric, the reality is when you came down there to have that conversation, for me, I was already sold. And as well, I was at a place where I was ready to come home. I had learned, I thought, what I needed to learn. We had done what I thought God asked us to do, and so it wasn't as much of a hard sell for me. The critical piece was that when you were able to meet my wife in her place with this request, and be able to walk through that process with her, then it was a game changer. My wife was like, "Okay, this makes perfect sense, and this is what we need to do."
so
And
from this, just so people understand the relationship. So you guys have been members of our church and now you're being sent out. You're working under the umbrella of Small Town Network, but your sending church is High Plains Christian Church. So which is kind of cool because we, as a church family, we get to say we have a daughter church, and then
Mm.
as a church planting organization, obviously we're excited to have you with that as well. So your church is going to be called High Desert Christian Church, which is probably what I should have named mine when I moved here, but I was
Yeah.
an outsider and didn't know all the stuff. You're local. So tell us, we have a few minutes left. Tell us a little bit about the community of Jerome, Idaho, and why it's a mission field, why we want to plant a church in Jerome,
So Jerome is just barely 15-minute drive from Twin Falls. Twin Falls is the metropolitan area, if you will. There's
the
70,000 people
metropolitan.
there. I know it's kind of
It's
crazy to
called a
call it that.
micropolitan.
Yes, exactly. But at any rate,
Micropolitan.
You've never heard that before? That's a real
No,
yeah,
term.
no.
it's the big city and everybody stays there. And so there's small towns all around us in this valley, and Jerome happens to be one of them.
Mm,
And over the years, we've had some experience with Jerome, and now we're living here, and we've got a lot more experience, and we're realizing that there's a large demographic of so over half of the population here are lower income, and there are people in need. We've looked around and we can see that that actual churches doing anything are very minimal, if anything. The
mm,
presence is really, really low. Um, in fact, I think Will at Renew is doing about as great of a job as there can be done in Jerome so far, and everybody else is kind of low. And so anyway, that being said, we're just realizing right away that obviously here's this massive void, and every time we turn around a corner and we talk about what we're going to do in Jerome with people who live here, they are just absolutely elated. They're so excited. And every time they say, "What you guys are doing is so needed." And then we look around and we see the demographic of super poor or super rich, either way. And most of the people with the money are going to drive into Twin Falls. So the rest of the other half, if you will, they're going to stay right here in Jerome, and they don't have any place to worship necessarily. And so we're going to try to fill that void.
Lots
Um,
more people than churches at this point in
yes.
Jerome.
cool.
Okay.
Very cool.
John, tell us, so if like someone is like, what's this new church going to be like? What's this new church about? What's the strategy? What are you going to do? Give us like in a nutshell what the new church plan is going to be like.
So let's go really quick back to our first conversation, Eric and I,
Okay.
Eric, you said it when you said we're like brothers from no other mothers. Okay, so we've experienced a lot of the same thing, and we've seen the failures of what's going on in our evangelical church across the United States. And I'm seeing that High Plains is not doing that. High Plains has got a different program. And so basically, in a nutshell, right away, I mean, it's everything that I've seen in action. And so we want to do the same thing. And High Plains is very, very intentional about discipleship, about small group, about church being done during the week. We meet for Sunday because it's a formal meeting, and you always meet on Sunday, and you always have a sermon on Sunday. But church is done during the week with High Plains Christian Church. And I plan on doing the exact same thing. I really see the small group settings, the more intimate conversations, the time that we can dig into scripture together. I see that as the most important thing. If you're going to make disciples, you've literally got to talk about the word. You literally
Mhm.
have to talk about life and real situations and real things that are going on. And you have to do that one-on-one. Yeah, it's hard on a Sunday morning for the preacher to be able to give a message and have that kind of connection with 100 people or 150 people or 30 people. It doesn't matter what the size is. To have that kind of connection is not going to happen until we meet face to face or in a small group setting. And so discipleship is absolutely critical. And lastly, High Plains Christian Church is reproducing itself over and over and over again through Small Town Network, but obviously through the intention of the leadership of that church, you being the head of that, the intention is to reproduce what we have here, and I want to do the same thing. I don't. I mean, we got to do this over and over and over again, and so that's
Yeah.
that's the plan.
Mm,
And what's cool as the pastor of High Plains Christian is that our elders, our elder team is what in traditional church plant you'd have what's called a management team. our eldership is your management team. So
Mm.
you and your wife and us and our wives, we all get together every other month and sit down for a catch up, what's going on, pray together, take care of each other. We are willingly sending some of our people with you, some of our best people with you to help get this church started. There's no like you can't have that person kind of thing going
Mm.
on. Like it's
Right.
like, it's a supermarket sweep, man. Just go in and grab who you need, whoever you can convince to come with you to Jerome. And the thing that's cool, man, is like, so we're in the situation where a lot of I think I was telling Tony this previously, but when we met up in Astoria a while back, or Seaside, we had a guy. I sat down and had a coffee with the guy who's a pastor of a church of about 400, and he goes, yeah, I don't think churches can really plant churches until they're about 1,000 people. And I said, that's really interesting. Let me tell you what we're doing. So
Mm.
last Sunday we had 131. Um, and conventional wisdom says you're way too small to plant a church. It's like, well, why? Um, we're all bivocational. So John has taken us a modest part-time salary and then providing for himself through his business. I've always had two jobs since I moved here. All my staff has two jobs. Um, and John is going to be a mechanic and a pastor of a
Mm.
small church in a small town. And it's just so cool to be like we're the kind of part of like defying the conventional wisdom that says you
Mm.
can't do that. Like, well, why not? And all we did, John and Tony, is we changed a word when I moved here. We changed one word from our vocabulary. We stopped talking about church growth and started talking about kingdom growth.
Mm.
Yes.
Just that one word, church to kingdom. And when the
Mhm.
kingdom is at the forefront, you say, man, I can't afford to lose a guy like John Kelley. I need him on my eldership team. It's like,
Mhm.
no, no, we can't afford to keep John Kelley
Right.
because the kingdom needs him leading a church in the next town over. And
Mm.
John's going to find guys like that that he's going to raise up and send to the next town over and the next town over. So we're so excited, John, that not just for like the church, but for you. I mean, you're going to have the opportunity to do something, to try something crazy that frankly most men are scared to try.
Mm.
They're not unqualified. They're just scared to put themselves out there and try to do something that takes a little faith. And I like saying to people a lot, we talk about faith all the time, but we never do anything that requires it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's for sure.
Step out, man. Like, see what
Mhm.
happens. If the only thing that happens is that John has a church of 40 or 50 people and shepherds the souls of 40 or 50 people and disciples them and maybe does it help someone else figure out how to do the same thing. If that's all you did in your lifetime, that would be a life well spent.
Mm.
But I think it's going to go better than that, and we're gonna see some cool things happen in Jerome, Idaho. So, um,
Awesome.
highdesert.cc is your website, which is currently under construction. Do you have that? Do you have that? Can we put that like phone number out that you have your church phone number if someone that's watching this wants to text you?
Mm.
If anybody wants to give money to John's church plant or move to
Right.
Jerome or talk
Yeah.
with John about what he's doing, what's the number they could text you at?
So I'm going to give you two numbers.
Okay.
First, it's 208-329-6645.
Okay.
And then on this podcast, you're welcome to use my personal number at 208-308-8635.
Perfect. So
Mm.
we're gonna actually wrap this up and then we're gonna like I said, I think I mentioned the last time that we record like a bunch in a row. So we're gonna get the next two guys on, and then we're all gonna come back in an hour and record with all of our church planters, our current church planters, which will be super fun. So it's gonna be like the Bald and Beautiful podcast
Yeah.
here in a minute when we get all of us
Right.
on. So
New
let
name.
me
New
let me
name.
wrap this up by
Yes.
saying thank you, John. Thank you, Tony, for this. If you guys like what we're doing, please like or subscribe wherever you watch or listen. If you're interested in Small Town Network, you can find us online at thesmalltownnetwork.com. And if you believe in the importance of planting disciple-making churches in smaller communities, we'd love you to prayerfully consider partnering with us in prayer and financial support. You have been listening to the Small Town Pastor Podcast.